To wrap it up here with the last session of the day, we have Andy Ellis with YL Ventures. Andy is an operating partner, which is code for, I'm sorry, you're a partner now. Okay, we're going to start that again. We have Andy Ellis, who is a partner with YL Ventures, joining us today. It's a whole different level to have an operating partner versus a partner get on a plane from Boston to come down and talk to us. So thank you for joining us, Andy. He is a seasoned executive with deep security expertise and the author of 1% Leadership. You're seeing a theme here today: thought leadership, a lot of deep expertise on stage, authors published. I bet Andy might even sign your book. You already did. All right, so I hear there's a book drifting around to be given away. He's received various accolades, including induction to the CISO Hall of Fame in 2021. I don't even know how you get in the Hall of Fame, but maybe you'll share it with us. That is impressive. So, ladies and gentlemen, last session of the day, if you would put your hands together and please let's welcome Andy to the stage.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate those of you who've stuck it out and are daring the Houston evening traffic, or maybe you're just coming out to dinner, or I think there might be an Astros game. I know there was one last night, so often assume there's one the next night. For those of you who wanted the bio, but that was really fast, I always like to have a bio slide. Most importantly, you can tag me on social media. I'm CSO Andy basically anywhere. My wife loves seeing people tweet pictures of me, because then she's like, Andy did actually go to a conference. Knows I'm still alive, so you can be my proof of life video. So today we're going to talk about security leadership. And the first thing I like to do is I put up a QR code. I do not mind you taking pictures, but if you would like the slides, they're at that QR code. There will be 2 more QR codes that show up during this talk, because this talk builds on 2 other talks I've given. Don't worry, you don't have to have seen those before being in here. But if you're like, ooh, I want to learn more about these concepts, those talks are also posted there with their slides and with recorded videos at other conferences that I've done. So today we're going to talk about security leadership. And the first thing we should do is we should think about what these 2 words mean. Because most people hear leadership and they probably think something closer to authority, right? Who is in charge? They're the leader. No, they're the authority. They're the one who gets to say, you will do this. That's not leadership. That's just authority. And then security is one of those words that I'm still not entirely sure what it means, but I've got some working definitions for these. So to me, security is enabling people to make wiser risk choices. Really important to recognize that people are going to make risk choices in their personal life and in their organizations. How many of you have an employer? Okay, this is where you get to put up your hands. How many of those employers do not take any risk at all? Right? Everybody's hands go down. If your organization doesn't take risk, it goes out of business. It's that simple, right? You take risk to get something done. Our job is to make those decisions a little bit better, so maybe there's less danger at the end of the day. Maybe there's more profit. Maybe we get the mission done in a better way. And that leadership is simply how you improve the efficacy and efficiency of turning energy into work. And I know that sounds really plebeian and mundane. You're like, no, leadership is about inspiring people. Those are the tools of leadership. What leadership is taking this transaction of energy into work and making it better. Now, this often translates to, in security, we say, don't do stupid shit. Apologies to the recording if that's going to be a problem. If the SEC has an issue later, oh well. And in leadership, this often translates to do more with less, right? Make this more efficient, so we're going to give you less energy, but we want you to produce more outcome. Now, you might already see a problem when we try to put security and leadership together, is that one of these says do, and one of these says don't do. And so leadership often looks like people trying to get stuff done and move forward, and security is saying stop, because we don't like your risk choice, rather than saying what's a better risk choice. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do we get to better risk choices, not about being a better technical expert, it's about being a better leader to help other people make better choices so they get more value out of their interaction with you. So let's look at the sort of stereotypical conversation that often happens between people, somebody who's a product owner who wants to get something done, and security who wants there to be less dangerous stuff happening. And now what's important to recognize is you don't ever talk to another human being. You think you talk to a human being, but what you're doing is you're talking to the caricature of the human that's in your head. You're looking at them, and you're seeing a shadow of who they are, and they're doing the same thing, and you often play roles. And so these roles get into conflict all the time, and why does this happen? Well, it happens because this product owner over here says, I want to do a thing, and they talk to the security person who hears, I want to do something dangerous. And the security person says, I'm going to get up on my horse, I'm the white knight, I'm going to protect us, you're the villain. Right? So you're the villain, you're dark, I'm the white knight, and because I'm the white knight, I'm this paladin who's sweeping in to fix problems, it's kind of okay if I burn some bridges, if I do some things that aren't otherwise nice, but then when I respond to my business stakeholder, I say things that make me look like a villain, which I justify. Like, I can be rude to this person, they're trying to destroy the company, and they're like, God, this person is rude and awful when I was just asking for some help, but I'm the person who's going to save our jobs because we'll have paychecks next month because I'm going to release a profitable product. And you get into this fascinating cycle where each one prefers the mode that they're in. Now, this is Houston, so this example probably won't work real well. How many of you have ever walked somewhere near where cars are? Parking lots work for this, which might be the only place in Houston that you walk, right? A handful of people admit to walking. How many of you drive somewhere? Okay, great, a lot of people. When you are driving, what do you think about pedestrians? Like, you're in the parking lot and you see a pedestrian, you're like, this idiot, not paying attention, think they have the right of way. Like, you're just in your mind, you're cursing them. You park your car, you get out, you step out. What do you think about the drivers? God, this person's trying to run me over. You're on both sides of this equation, and you're doing this to yourself. Imagine when you don't have the empathy to see the person on the other side. That's what we're going to try to fix. How this often instantiates itself, those of you who've done product reviews probably will resemble this conversation. Someone says, here's my project, is it safe? What do you hear? Here is my dangerous plan. Will you sign off on it so I can blame you later? So you say, here's my ISO 27002 checklist. Fill it out so I know you did everything. Which this person's like, oh my God, you're trying to justify your budget by giving me make work? I don't even know what some of these words mean. So fine, let me ask for help. Like, what does it mean when you say, like, that you have to protect system-level objects? Anybody recognize that phrase from the PCI DSS? Not defined anywhere in PCI DSS, but you have to do it. So they're going to ask for help, but what do you hear? Oh, I can't be bothered to understand security when I'm putting security at risk. So we respond and we say, well, we'll at least fill it out for you, which then further improves this, like, just give us more budget. We're going to justify our job, like public choice theory, right here going strong. Notice that these two people don't really like each other or have any respect for each other. At some point, the product owner comes back and says, well, are you done yet? Like, how long does it take you to fill out a checklist? All that you hear is, all I care about is my schedule. I don't actually care about this checklist. Just like, I want to release this, get out of my way. Which is fair, is about where the product owner is at that point. And so we come up with some question we're going to ask, like, oh, I see in here that you're not using cha-cha 20 poly 1305. Now, how many people know what cha-cha 20 poly 1305 is in the room? Great, a handful of people. You should never say those words out loud to anybody who didn't raise their hand, just to be very clear. This is actually a signing hashing algorithm. But if you say this to somebody, they're going to be like, yeah, you're making that up. Or if you're not, you're just trying to prove that you're smarter than I am. Nobody likes the person who does that, unless they're on the keynote stage, by the way. Then it's okay. Like, you can get away with these words. And so then they're going to ask you the hard question. I always love this one. Is that a showstopper? Like, are you really going to hold up this project over this one petty thing that we know you're never going to say in front of an executive? To which all that you hear is, I'm doing this no matter what. Like, this is not a good conversation. So you just say, well, I don't recommend launch, but this is not a showstopper. I'm going to cover my bases. Right? And the other party realizes this, and at some point, this just becomes formalized. This is what, in many organizations, product safety and product security reviews look like. If you don't start with a good relationship, you end up with a very bad one. And they'll just be like, oh, we'll just send a junior person to you to deal with this pain. And you're like, well, I'll just hire a junior person to go deal with this pain. And at some point, you have two low-paid employees yelling at each other, and they don't even know why, because they weren't here for the history of when this started. Not very effective. So let's come back and talk about leadership, because we don't want to have that happen. So leadership, we said, increasing the efficiency and efficacy of turning energy into work, which means that leadership only exists in the context of work, which looks something like this. We have energy, we're going to produce value. Here's the second of those QR codes, whole talk just on this topic. And so the challenge here is that most of what leadership does is makes this transaction worse. Most leaders hurt their businesses more than they help them. How do we do that? Well, first thing we do is we exhaust our workforce. Right? Before they even start spending energy to produce value, they have to spend energy to show up. We ask them to come to work when they're sick, thus exhausting even more people. But we don't give them the time off. We make them come into the office when there's no need for them to be in the office, so we lose energy to the commute. We have them work crazy hours and work incidents, so they're tired. And that just crushes a little bit of the energy that we have available to us as businesses. Then, of course, we make them feel excluded. They walk into a room and they question whether they should be there. The women in the audience have probably all felt this at some point. You walked into a room, you were the only woman in the room, and your brain had to think for a moment, is somebody going to ask me to get coffee? That sucks. Should be very clear on that one. Let's recognize that every person at some point feels excluded, and that just wastes their energy thinking about why they're excluded, rather than feeling included. We demotivate people. We say things that they're like, oh, I spent all night working on this when you asked me to, and your first comment was, this isn't good enough. Not even a thank you for doing the work. Let's make it better. Oh, this isn't good enough, and you moved on. The next time you ask me to do a thing, my energy level isn't there. I'm going to give you less value. Sometimes they're just not able. We ask the wrong person to do a thing because we've never asked them to do this. We didn't invest in their training, so they don't have the right abilities to solve the problems that we have in front of them. Sometimes our work is just ineffective. This is not the person being ineffective. This is things like you get 95% of the way done on a project, and then you just stop. Have you ever had that? Like, you're ready to deploy something, and your boss is just like, yeah, this is not a priority anymore. Straight up ineffectiveness, right? It's kind of like, fumbling the football at the 3-yard line, Michael. You knew that was coming. Sorry, I have to make fun of Michael's Cowboys. It's all I've got this season. My Patriots aren't doing any better. Then, of course, there's misalignment, where a different team is working at cross purposes to you, and so you spend all this energy, you think you produce value, and somebody else is spending it in the other direction. And now, if you're lucky, one team runs over the other one, and at least you get half the value. If you're unlucky, they run into each other, and you get none of the value, and you have destroyed all of that energy. So these are all of the things that compress the value that we get out of our organizations. So we want to think about ways that we're going to sort of push back on this. And so we want to think about how do we better align our organizations so that the work that we're doing matches up across the organization in that context. How do we make sure that we're planning so that we're not ineffective, that the work that we do produces value even if it's long-running work, that we develop our people, single most important skill, like making sure that your people are better tomorrow than they were today. How do we inspire people so they want to do work for us? They almost always want to do work. Very few people are like, yeah, I don't want to do anything at all. I mean, some days I feel like that, I'll be very honest. But usually the challenge is how do you align their desires with what we need to get done? How do we make people feel included and welcomed into our organization so they're not spending time wondering if they belong in this place? Then how do we keep track of their wellness? How do we make sure that they remain full of energy so we just get more energy out of them to produce into value? And at a high level, when we think about these, planning and alignment are what people often call leadership, but is really just authority. You have organizational responsibilities there. Middle section is what we think of as management when you lead a team. And over here, this is support. How do we support the individual, whether that's ourselves or someone else? So here's going to be our sort of 6 structures that we're going to think about for leadership, and I'll put that on the side for a moment. And let's talk a little bit about security. Another talk for you about how to do risk management. Oops, sorry, another QR code. So remember we said security is about making wiser risk decisions. And so to talk about that, the most important thing we have to think about is how do humans make risk decisions? And so when we think about that, audience participation, fill in the blank for me. How are humans at risk management? Horrible, bad. Come on, you can wake, like this is your chance to shout. I love subpar. That's fantastic. Subpar. I don't think I've ever had anybody say that, but that's beautiful. Right, so I've asked this question a lot of times. These are the answers. Guess what? You're all wrong. Humans are not awful at risk management. It's why we try to stop them, because we think that they're awful. In fact, humans are awesome at risk management. And I will give for you one piece of evidence that is all you need to believe that. We're the dominant species on this planet. If we were awful at risk management, we would not be here anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that we're perfect at it, and it's possible tomorrow we won't be here anymore. But that's a different problem. But we have to understand, how do humans make risk choices that is so wise, that is so awesome? Because if we do, then we can manipulate the way those choices are made, and that's where security leadership is going to come in. So very quickly, the way to think about this is using the OODA loop. It's one of my favorite things. Colonel Boyd came up with this to think about how fighter pilots make decisions, which is you observe something. After you've observed it, you orient yourself. You take that factoid, you put it in the models that you have for the world. You then decide what you're going to do, and then you act. Now, the problem with this is most people do not think, I have looked at something. Okay, that's an observation. Now let me think about what this means, right? This is happening so fast inside your brain that you don't even process when it's happening, but we get to take advantage of that a little bit later. Now, each of these bring in context. So observation, this is a fascinating thing. I'm going to ask a question. I want some honesty. Before I asked this question, how many of you were not aware of the feel of the chair beneath your rear end? Put up your hand if you weren't thinking about what the chair felt like under your butt. Let's be honest, right? A lot of hands are going to go up. If your hand didn't go up, either you're lazy, you're tired, or you have sensory processing disorder. Like literally, it is very important for you not to pay attention to the world, because your brain can handle about 40 bits per second of input information, and it is exposed at your body level to 11 million. We are optimized to not pay attention to the world. This is a superpower. Don't pay attention to the world. Some of this is hardwired. It's why our eyes have like cool things, like you can see color and motion in your peripheral vision, but you can't focus because that's all that matters over there. Like it's amazing all of the ways that our bodies are designed to filter out the world, but then our brain does it too. It predicts what it thinks the world will look like, and as long as the world looks like that, it sort of filters out and says, it doesn't matter. You expected that person to be walking, they're still walking, ignore them, right? Don't put that into conscious cognition. And so we're filtering out in observation to make sure we only see what's important. That's a really thing we gotta pay attention to, because it's what our subconscious mind thinks is important, not what we've decided. Then in orientation, we have a bunch of models of the world. The little icon I have up there is Anscombe's quartet. If you're not familiar with Anscombe's quartet, it's a really fascinating set of data. Each of those plots in the corner have the exact same slope across them, the same linear correlation if you do linear regression. They have the same average. They have the same standard deviation. So if you just tried to summarize this with sort of 3 standard measurements, this is the same thing. But you can look at that and be like, yeah, these are totally not the same thing. I understand what this is. And this is what's really important. Your models of the world inform how you think about what's happening in the world. So when you think about confirmation bias, all that is you have a model of the world. If you see one data point that satisfies it, you're like, yep, great. The world is as I expected. If you see one data point that doesn't, you're like, outlier, ignore it. Right? Your models matter for making decisions about what you're going to do, because most of the time you're going to discard your inputs because they're not important. Don't make decisions here. When you decide what to do, you will fall back on your playbooks. What do I know how to do? What have I decided I might do in advance? It's why the bystander effect is such a huge problem. For those of you not familiar with the bystander effect, imagine I collapsed of a heart attack right here. Now, I know there's this one person in the room who's an EMT who knows what to do, but most humans will freeze, and they're going to look. Why? Because they're bystanders, and they're now going to look around, and because they froze for a moment, and everybody else is frozen, maybe they shouldn't do anything. That's why in incident response training, we focus on that first action, right? Break that moment where you don't even have a playbook and go do a thing. Doesn't even matter what the thing is sometimes, because the first person who stands up to do something, everybody else is like, great, now I can do something. Someone call 911, somebody start CPR, somebody get Rich down here, like whatever it's going to be. So we have playbooks because when we make decisions, we almost always fall back to decisions we've made before. And then finally, when we act, we like to do things over and over again. We like to use our skills. We will fall back on the things we're good at, and we'll try to avoid the things we're bad at. It's that simple. Like, okay, I need to do something. I'm good at this, so I'm going to pick the one I'm good at. Oh, I'm not good at this. Let's not pick that. So now we've got this model for how people think. Observe, orient, decide, act. Let's now take that and think about how we're going to merge security, understanding how people think and make decisions, because we want them to make better decisions, wiser risk choices, and we at the same time want them to make their energy more effective at producing value. So we can think of this as like orthogonal things that don't really overlap, but we can find ways to overlap them. And so I filled in 24 different skills for you. I promise I'm not going to sprint through 24 skills in the next 26 minutes. That would be kind of rude. Every one of these skills is a chapter in my book. So those of you who got a book at the book signing, you've got my chapters. This slide is on that website I shared with you, but I'm going to talk about a few of these so we can highlight the skills you might want to think about as you go forward. So let's look at this first row for observation. This is one of my favorite ones. Create safety so that people can warn you of danger. Right? How many times after some incident do you discover that there was someone who knew and they didn't tell anyone, or they said they tried to tell someone, but nobody listened? It's always like a junior employee who's like, well, I knew this was going to happen. Now, it might be hindsight bias. So like, well, I knew there was a problem there. Now that it happened, I can totally confirm it. But the challenge is in most organizations, people don't feel safe to tell you that there's a problem. Because this is what their experience is that whenever they try to tell you something or tell somebody else something, nobody listens. So at that very first conversation, you fill out the checklist, you say, here's your one risk, la, 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 I'm just going to roll out. Is this a showstopper? And what's happening is the person who's reporting the risk is trying to say this is dangerous, and the other person says that can't possibly be true. And that's actually a quote from a boss I used to have. He would always say that. Whenever you said this won't work, that can't possibly be true. Because what's going on here? What's going on is a binary conversation about a decision. This is not a conversation about nuanced risk, where you say, oh, look, we're going to do a thing. There's maybe a little safer ways we could do it. Like, we're going to go eat tonight. We have to walk across the street. Maybe we should walk through the crosswalk instead of like just wandering out into the road in the Astros traffic. I don't know. But what gets heard is, I'm trying to stop you from doing this thing, and so you're going to ignore it if you're the person in charge of doing a thing. That can't possibly be true, because I found a way in which you're wrong. And so what does the security person learn? To stop doing this, because this is a career-limiting move. Just to be clear, you walk up to a vice president and say, this plan you're embarking on is dangerous, you shouldn't do it. You maybe get that once, maybe twice, rarely a third time, before the vice president goes and tells your boss, I don't ever want to see that person again. And if you mention them in a meeting, they'll later be like, why does that person still work for us? Right? So we make it unsafe for people to tell us about danger. One of my favorite tools for dealing with this is what's known as the pre-mortem. And the concept of a pre-mortem is whenever you're going to do some project, something that has a lot of risk involved in it, that's okay. You stop for a moment and you say, look, we're about to launch on this one, but let's just assume we fail. And in 1 year, we find out this was a catastrophe. Tell me the story of why. And you go around your room, all the people who are informed, and you say, look, you're not predicting that it failed. I'm just going to concede it already failed. Tell me why it failed. And they're going to give you a story about a risk they know about that they don't think is quite well enough managed. But it's non-confrontational. They're not saying to stop. And so I've made it safe for them to tell me about a danger, and now I can think about whether that danger means maybe I'll change my plan a little bit. Because otherwise what happens is that can't possibly be true, just runs over that this is dangerous, and you go do a thing, and you didn't hear about the danger. So the other thing you want to do is rather than saying this is dangerous, this could be dangerous. Very subtle change here. I am making it safe to disagree with me. When I say this could be dangerous, I invite you to argue and tell me, well, maybe it's a little bit dangerous, but it's not that dangerous. Okay, well, let's talk about how dangerous it is. Because my goal here is not to stop the work from happening. My goal is to maybe just change the shade of this work a little bit so that we get to somewhere slightly different that is safer, gives us more value, is better off. So make it safe for people to have that conversation about risks in a non-binary way. We're not trying to stop people from doing things. Because otherwise, you don't have sensors into what's going on, because especially as a security leader, you have no idea what's happening in the organization if people don't tell you. Even as an individual, you probably don't have enough information. So let's talk about orientation, right? How do people know to listen to you? And so let's come back to that security questionnaire, and I've seen this conversation a lot. You know, somebody here is in the middle of shipping software, right? They've got a job to do, ship software, and you come in and you're going to tell them all the reasons why there's a problem here. And you go on and on and on. And at some point, they realize you will keep talking, and they can keep shipping product. And this is totally to their benefit, right? Because you made an argument that they can pick apart, right? They'll go look at this, and they'll be like, well, oh, your mom's going to be disappointed in you? Why do I care about that? Right? Whichever one of those arguments is bad. All it takes is one argument. You can build a 1,000-point case that has 999 perfect points. One of them is bogus. That's what somebody's going to latch on. And they're going to say, because this one is wrong, I can't trust the rest of your arguments. You've contaminated it. Right? Your job, when you want to change someone's orientation, is give them just enough to believe. So instead, maybe your conversation looks something like this. Look, all I need you to do is add an MFA because our customers demand it for compliance. We don't have to get into an argument about which MFA and why to do it. I need you to agree to go ship that product. That's it. Right? So make that small argument rather than that big argument when you're trying to get something done. Because the moment they believe you, you're done. They're like, I want to do a thing. Great. Is it the perfect thing? I don't care. I want you to practice doing things on my behalf when I'm a security leader. And if you pick things that are not what I would have picked, but they're still good work, there is plenty of good work to get done in this world. Pick some. So now let's talk about the decision making. So important thing to remember, there is no such thing as a perfect plan. Those of you who are Marines might recognize General Krulak's words in this one, which is a 70% plan violently executed will beat a 100% plan any day. Pretty much every general has some variant of it. I just like Krulak's formulation a little bit better. And the way to think about this is, imagine you had a bag of M&Ms, and I'm not going to tell you how big the bag is, and I tell you, like, I want you to pick the hardest M&M out of this bag. Right? Now, those of you who are computer programmers might think about an algorithm and be like, oh, I can stage a tournament and like pair up every M&M. It'll be like the NFL. I'm not even going there, Michael. And we'll squeeze them together, and whichever one breaks, I get to eat. It clearly wasn't the hardest one, and we'll just keep doing this until there's one M&M left, and I'll have the perfectly hard M&M. Then your boss comes back like 5 minutes later and is like, give me the hardest M&M, and you're looking down where you've only crushed like half of them, but now you have half of M&Ms that have only beaten one M&M. You don't know how good these are. Instead, you take one M&M, you're like, this is my plan. Like, this is the best plan I've got right now. It doesn't matter what the M&M is. And then you say, do I have to make a decision right now? Nope, great, let me take another M&M, test it against this one. Whichever one breaks, I eat it. I've got a best M&M so far. At any point, if you come in and say, do you have a best M&M? Yes, I do. And in fact, the longer you give me, the more likely this is to actually be the best M&M in the bag, or at least a really good one. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I love this one. My wife and I love this one so much that we use this for like all of our decision making. We're like, we want to go on vacation this summer. Where do we want to go? And one of us will pick a stupid location. We'll be like, oh, we're going on vacation this summer. Let's go to Houston. Yeah. Guess what? That's our plan. Now we're like, okay, where is better than Houston in the summer? Anywhere that's better than Houston, boom, becomes our next plan. And we just keep iterating, and we have these conversations, and they're action-oriented conversations about getting a little bit better every time until we're like, okay, it's now time to make plans for the summer. Let's figure out what we're going to do, right? And this year is our last time that we're going to have a kid in the house as we head into summer. So we're like, we got to make sure this one's really good. But we're starting with, as long as it's a little bit good, we can get it better. We've still got a couple months before we got to settle that one down. At the same time, you need a vision. And a vision is about who you will be when you get there. Right? It doesn't have to be specific, because your goal is to say, I don't want to go on bad paths. I don't want to do a thing inconsistent with that vision. I just want to do a thing that's going to keep me there. So how am I going to test myself with the vision? Right? What do I want to be? Like for my team when I was at Akamai, our vision for the organization was InfoSec exists to be a helpful and sustainable guide to a safer destiny for Akamai, its customers, and the internet. Everything we did, we could test against that vision. Are we on a path that is helpful? Is it sustainable? Right? Are we a guide? We're not telling you what to do, but we're like a Sherpa. We'll help you get there. And we think we have a lot of wisdom, but if you don't want to listen to us, we didn't do our job right. How do we help you get there? And so we're going to combine these two things. And so think about, like, you decide you want to do a thing. And I'll go back to 2009. Anybody remember Operation Aurora? Not one of my favorite days. I get a phone call from Heather Adkins at Google, and she says, hey, guess what? You guys have been breached. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, there's something, we have control of Chinese command and control, and you have a system calling out to it. You may remember this as 300 high-tech companies had been breached. Google was one of them. Akamai was another one of them. Not a very good day for us. And we said, after doing all of the analysis, which was interesting, we were like, wow, lateral movement sucks. And so our vision was, we're going to eliminate lateral movement inside our environment. It took us 9 years. We actually released that as a product once it was done. That was the origin of Akamai's ZTNA product, which was at the time known as EAA. And I will tell you, along the way, we changed paths a lot. We actually deployed at one point 8021x on wired networks. Anybody who's ever done that knows how stupid this is. But it actually gave us infrastructure to put X509 certificates on every single device, which meant we could do X509-based authentication for everything on the network 6 years later. But we had a vision, and we took some steps, and at some point we built it. So think about this like building a wall. Sometimes you just have to take like the first steps, right? And the first step might just be like lay down that first row of bricks. And it might be after laying down a row of bricks, you're like, I'm going to tear these up, but you've only invested a little bit in that row of bricks. Or maybe you're like, ooh, I like this as a path instead of a wall. Let's pivot and build a path here. Or maybe you've learned enough that now you can start the second phase of your project. Like this pilot worked, let's roll that out a little more carefully. Okay, we got a pony wall. That's nice. Everybody likes it. Nobody's arguing. Great, let's fill in the whole wall. Right? And sometimes that wall doesn't look like what you meant it to be. I did not mean when we started the Zero Trust journey to eliminate passwords at Akamai. Except at some point we said, well, if we've got an X509 cert on your laptop and we're doing push auth to your phone, isn't that multi-factor? Great. So when we did push auth, we turned off passwords. Everybody was so excited. Our IT team was not, because they said, we're going to slowly roll out Duo to our employee base. It's going to take us 1.5 years. And I said, but anybody who asks, you'll roll it out. And they're like, yep. I said, great. The first team that got it was all like, I don't have to type in my password. And the next day, everybody's filing tickets. I would like Duo, because I don't want to have to type in a password anymore. Right? So sometimes it moves fast, but we had a vision, we had a path. So keep this in mind. Adapt your plan as things go on, but make sure you're making progress. And then let's think about actions. So most of the time we're going to spend doing work. Two really important things here. First of all, the great work that you do on any given day is rarely more important than just doing good work for a much longer period of time. Right? Don't burn people out right now because you lose them. Either they're just not feeling well or you lose them to another employer who doesn't demand so much of them. At the same time, recognize that you need skill balance. Not all problems are technical problems. And so think about the hero culture, Right? In the hero culture, you have this amazing 10x person who can get everything done. And so you have a problem, so they build for you a very quick tool to solve this problem. Right? And then they move on, they go do something else. They're not going to support it, except one day it lights on fire. And now you've got a crisis. And the only person who knows how to fix the crisis is the person who built the tool. So, they come along and they're like, great, I will go put out the fire. And that's what their job is. They put out the fire. But when they do it, we discover that their tool doesn't quite work right anymore, right? Something went wrong, either while they were fixing it or beforehand. So what do? They go fix it again. Right? Now they make it a little bit more complicated. They add in some features to deal with one aspect of whatever that problem was. And this cycle goes on and on and on. Right? When you have an incident, you call them at 3 a.m., and they get grumpy because they have other things to do. By the way, I'm actually a firm believer in calling developers at 3 a.m. when their systems break. Why? Because it will incentivize them to build systems that don't break. But at some point, recognize that if this person is taking 16 hours to fix a problem, you need to replace them with somebody else to fix the problem after 8 hours. They're stupid after that. So maybe we think about using someone with a different skill set to support this problem. Oh wait, we have a system, a technical system, that doesn't quite work correctly. Okay, well maybe there's a process or a people problem, and somebody else might know something like put an asbestos tablecloth over it so that it doesn't fall apart. Right? Someone with different skills. Because what happens in a crisis, if you only hire people that seem like you're deeply technical, they're deeply technical, when their skills aren't up to snuff and they escalate to you don't actually have much better skills than they do. And oftentimes you want them to escalate to somebody who has different skills. Because it's not that they were weak at their core, it's that the problem was not in their core capability. This is a process problem. Let's go solve the process. But if both of you are technical people, neither of you will see it. So, 24 different skills. I only highlighted 6 of them for you there. But the important thing for us to remember is the business is trying to get stuff done. At the same time, they're making this risk decision, having this OODA loop running through that the entire time. What we're trying to do is figure out how do we tweak that loop? How do we make them see things that they hadn't seen before? How do we do it in the smallest way so that they don't find a reason to argue with us? It's like, oh, I noticed this thing. I'm done. Right? I might need to make 12 things to convince you that we have a problem, but in every incident, I'd only tell you one of the 12 things. After 12 incidents, you're like, oh, I have this belief that we have a serious underlying problem here. You would not have believed me if I told you after the first incident, even if I saw it. So I'm going to start changing your model of the world slowly, giving you better decisions, helping you act better. So thanks, everyone, for coming out. If you want these slides, they're at that QR code, so you can go get them, as well as the 2 other talks are linked from there. And I really appreciate everybody's time, and have a great day.